Welcome back to A People's Guide to Publishing. I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing and Distribution. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 25 years.
I'm Elly. I'm the editorial and marketing director here at Microcosm. We are an independent mid-list publisher based in Portland, Oregon. We have 14 employees, over 650 titles in print with 20 to 40 new books per year, and we distribute thousands of titles from other publishers.
We started this podcast so that we can share what we've learned with newer publishers so that you can learn from our mistakes.
Or maybe you just want to understand the publishing industry.
This week, we are going to talk about when you publish a book, who is the client? A topic we've skirted around maybe more than a few times.
This is a controversial question.
It shouldn't be, but I suppose it is.
Should we give people a lead up or should we just tell them the answer right away?
Oh no, you really want to bury the answer when the answer is one word.
All right, well, who do various people think is the client?
Who could be the client? Who would be the client?
I guess it depends on whose perspective you are. Like if you're the author, the publisher, someone else involved.
Well, I guess when it's corporate publishing, it's the corporation. So how's that for a spoiler, non-spoiler answer?
But let's get a little less cynical and talk about fun, independent publishing.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess from my perspective, as
don't give it away.
Somebody who works for a publisher, it's very easy to fall into thinking, well, when I'm the editor, it's very easy to fall into thinking that the author is the client.
Right. I mean, that tends to be the greatest misconception that we get from interns and sometimes from staff and, often from authors.
Yeah. Is that, we are providing a service. And it confuses things that there are actually a lot of author services companies out there where the author is the client. They will bend over backwards to create the book that you envision, even if that book is not going to sell that well.
And just, thoroughly nonsensical.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of it, obviously, is the greater notion that, you could conceivably do everything to fulfill the author's unique vision, and by and large, we definitely have authors that still see things that way, even though we sort of prep the situation that it does not work that way.
And then the thing that I have to train the staff and interns that I manage out of is thinking of me as the client. Like their boss.
Right, yeah, that's a good one too, right. And this is something, we have to go over a lot, where I'm I am not developing this to my taste. I am not editing this to my taste. I am not designing this to my taste. That is never and can never be the goal.
Right. When I'm working on a book, I never think, I try never to think, what would Joe do?
Oh.
I mean, sometimes I think that, and then I don't always go with that answer.
Mm-hmm. Right. That can just be something to consider when you're having to make a decision that is somewhat complicated.
And I'm not I'm never going to be it will really please Joe if we turn this book about, culture in Cleveland to be 100% about punk music from the 90s in Cleveland. I mean, Joe would love that book, but that doesn't necessarily, but he's not the client.
I'm only going to buy one copy and I'm probably not going to pay for it.
Fair enough. Which leads us to who is going to buy it and who is going to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. And spoiler alert, 5 minutes in, the person that is going to pay for it and is going to read it and is going to make a decision, probably fairly harshly one way or another, is the reader. The person that is hopefully the whole point of the project, that you are making something for them. You are not making something for the critics. You're not making something
for your mom who you're estranged from, or your ex who you're trying to prove something to.
And they're not. Your ex doesn't care.
I mean, your ex might deeply care, but they're also not going to buy the book or pay for it.
Yes, they are not going to fall for any sort of ruse or attempt at making them feel a certain way through any decision you make with the book.
Okay, there's one more
Wait.
There's one more entity that people often confuse as the client in like mid-level publishing and larger publishing, which is the like bookstore buyer or the distributor buyer.
That's a good point. It's a good point. Yeah.
And like you do actually kind of have to treat them a little like the client.
Right. And a lot of that is, I mean, a lot of publishers make them the king client rather than the intermediary client.
And we do a lot of things, like we jump through a lot of hoops that like we really are doing it for the middle people, not for the reader, like blurbs, for instance. Or like often...
Blurbs service the reader too.
They do, but, you know, jacket copy is often written for the middle person in mind, not for the reader.
Unfortunately.
Yes, very. I've been immersed in that for the last few days.
But at the end of the day, the reader is the person, assuming they get to see it, that is going to fundamentally decide if this book sinks or swims. So they ultimately, I mean, assuming you want as many people to read your book as possible, which I should assume that you do.
Or at least the right people.
Yeah.
As many of the right people as
right.
possible.
And then not saying that, like, every work needs to, should be, or would be a mainstream work, but just saying that, like, you would want anybody that is interested in your subject matter to enjoy your book, should they happen upon it.
So, like, editing, development, marketing, how the cover, the title, all of that, the price, all of that really needs to serve your reader. Have we done an episode yet on, like, figuring out who is the reader?
We've, like, that's another one we've beaten around the bush with, but I don't know that we have.
Well, coming soon to a podcast near you. Maybe we'll do that one.
Maybe even this podcast. Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub.
On Twitter at Microcosm.
On Facebook at Microcosm Publishing.
On Instagram at Microcosm_pub.
And here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.